Good morning. Lauren Elizabeth here. I'm jumping on to talk about parenting with a narcissist. In my situation, an ex-narcissist. Well, an ex-husband. I think he's still a narcissist. I'm not going to really get into all the characteristics of the relationship or him. For me, I guess I'll say briefly, it was a long-standing covert narcissist in him, an empath in me, which is a very popular combination. Not to say that I'm perfect, and not to say that I didn't also exhibit narcissist characteristics throughout the relationship, because I did. I believe that I fell into that because it worked. And I do also believe that that's why he exhibits those tendencies, because it does work. It works for him in keeping him from having to go within and to deal with emotions and to be honest with himself. That's what I believe. And I know that I fell into it for that same exact reason, that as our relationship was looping and I was being blamed, and any reaction I had to his mood or his behavior or his words or his no words or his lies or his whatevers was always turned on me. And I did truly get to a really dark place where I believed that I was the cause of all of our issues, the cause of all of our children's struggles. And there were times where I just didn't want to live anymore. And I'm very glad to have been able to get out of that and to have been guided out of that. But anyway, so, as I've done a lot of work in that space on myself specifically, not successful in mending the relationship with him and realizing that that's okay. Like I've done my work, and I'm in a really good place, and he really doesn't trigger me anymore, that was a big thing a big journey, a long journey to get to the place where he doesn't trigger me anymore. He still tries. He still, he knows what my buttons were, and he still tries to push them. But the buttons are gone. They're just not even buttons anymore, so he can't. However, what I'm now seeing is the energy of that relationship still exists, and it's manifesting through my children. Specifically, my youngest son, who over the past couple of weeks, I have had exchanges with him that did trigger me. And they were, I don't even know how to explain it other than I reacted immediately. I didn't even have the capacity to step back and look at the situation for what it truly was. I started assuming things. I reacted. I really reacted. And there was both situations. There was a lot of back and forth. And then it was over the phone, and he won't pick up the phone. So it's all text, which, as we know, is a terrible way to communicate. But of course, then it was all the same stuff. It was, he's saying stuff via text because it's easy to do. There's no tone. He doesn't hear my voice. He doesn't have to feel the feelings. He can just blah. And not picking up the phone, and then sometimes ignoring my text, telling me, saying I'm crazy, saying he's not going to talk to me, all this stuff. It was just like I was reliving a conversation with my husband, my ex-husband. And it was awful. Both situations were awful. They ended up in tears with both of them. Yesterday was more in the physical, so it started over the phone, but I was picking him up, so we ended up, which was a good thing, because we ended up being able to talk. The first instance we also resolved, but it came back through. So clearly it didn't resolve all the way. And in the first instance, a couple of weeks ago, I realized myself afterwards that it was these tendencies, these narcissistic tendencies and behaviors and patterns that were coming up through him. And I was like, okay, maybe there's more to resolve in that space, and maybe it's, I do truly believe that it's resolved with my ex, and that he specifically doesn't trigger me. However, I think, and at the same time, I think that there's more for me to resolve in that space, perhaps because going forward, I need to make sure that I recognize those kind of characteristics and don't react, or have the ability to step back and see it for what it is before there's any reaction. So I do believe that that's why this has been coming up through my son. And like I said, the first time it happened a couple of weeks ago, I did get to the point where I recognized what it was, and I worked on it with myself and with some people that I work with, but that's as far as I took it. I didn't kind of loop back with him on it. I did kind of have the sense of who I really should keep my eye on that, but then I kind of let it go and moved on. And then when this came up yesterday, it came up so fast. I was doing things that I didn't really want to do, but has to get done. As we all know, we have those things that have to get done that we don't enjoy. And yet I was, consciously aware of my emotions, and I was stepping back, and I was taking breaths and doing all the things that I need to do. And then suddenly I was in this moment of having to rush around and get to him after school and get to my son after school. And suddenly he had texted me, and I was like, what? No, what? And it started immediately. So there's a piece of that, obviously, that I need to continue to work on. I know once I start back in my old habit of doing a million things at once and rushing around and going from one thing to another and, multitasking, that I kind of lose my grounding or my balance, and that's when I don't have the ability to step back and look at a situation for what it is, see it from a different perspective, so see it from all perspectives, not just a reactionary one. But anyway, what I did differently yesterday was we had this the conversation, and as a matter of fact, so it wasn't easy. There were moments where he just was ground in his, I'll call it stubbornness, because that's what the energy felt like. But I know he wasn't being consciously stubborn, but there was something in him that could not admit that he had done, I don't want to say anything wrong, but that he had, what he had told me he didn't want to do was, he really needed to do it. And he just turned it all on me. He just turned it right on me and said that I was the reason he didn't want to do it, and it just didn't even make any sense. Again, back to that, and of course I reacted to that. I didn't even have the ability to step back and be like, okay, that doesn't make any sense, and blah blah blah. I eventually did do that, and we had a conversation, but he was so grounded and so holding his stance, and I could literally physically see that he was protecting himself from emotions. And at one point, I don't know, and now that I'm saying this, I think I'm feeling that maybe I had taken on his emotions that he was unable to tap into, because I broke down in tears. I just started sobbing, and he was like, "What happened?" He apologized. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you cry. Of course, first he said, "Why are you crying? This is just," I forget what he said, "this is just a conversation. This is nothing to cry about," which I used to get all the time from my ex-husband. What are you crying for? This is so stupid. This is, blah, blah, blah. You're blowing it out of proportion. And then I would always feel bad and all this other stuff, but I didn't. And I remember I cried, and I allowed the tears to come, and I didn't say anything. I didn't scream or yell or try to make him feel bad. The tears came, and it was what it was. I wasn't trying to hide them. I wasn't trying to make him feel bad. They just came, and like I said, I do believe that it was his emotions that were coming, that I was picking up on. But it did kind of snap something in him, and very shortly after that, he actually said something about his dad, and he said, "I know, I see it in me sometimes. I see," because his dad, and then at that moment, I realized, oh my God, me getting out of the relationship with my ex, great, good for me, healing for me, great, but all that did was allow my ex to turn the treatment that the way he used to treat me, on to my kids, and particularly my youngest. He doesn't have a car. He can't just get up and leave. He's, younger. He's still a young teenager, and so he's kind of stuck there. He lives with his dad. The boys all live with their dad, and I know my ex doesn't even realize he's doing it, because he could never even admit that he was doing it to me. So, but now all of a sudden I'm like, well, wait a minute, whoa. It's one thing you did it to me, but now you're doing it to basically a child who, number one, doesn't deserve it. Well, nobody deserves it. Nobody deserves it. But yet he doesn't even remotely understand it. And so typically I protect my children, or I guess protect my ex, and that I don't say, well, that's because he this and he that, and yet yesterday I did, because it's not okay that, I just have massive chills right now, and I just want to cry. It's not okay that instead of working on himself, that he's just taken that abuse of me and transitioned it to my children and our children. And because there is no capacity or capability currently within my ex to see what he's doing, to admit what he's doing. The only recourse I have is to be honest and upfront with my children. And that's exactly what I did. And so we had a brief conversation about it, particularly after my son said that, I see, Dad is so miserable, Dad is so, X, Y, and Z to me. He says all these things to me. He makes me feel this way. He makes me feel that. And he said, I see that in myself. And of course, for me, that was another round of tears because obviously it hurts my heart that it hurts my heart that my son is already acting or taking on characteristics of that narcissistic, abusive behavior. And so our conversation got to, briefly in that moment, kind of a recognition of it, and a mutual understanding that we need more conversations around this because it's not something that he wants to take through his teenage years, and through certainly not into his adult years. And so then at that point there was kind of like enough conversation, enough tears for the moment. He had kind of had enough. So I left and he went on with his day. And later it just so hit me that the reason that my ex exhibits those behaviors, the reason that I did, and the reason that my son is, and maybe this resonates with other people who are either dealing with narcissists or themselves are exhibiting those tendencies, that it's coming from a place of fear, a place of not feeling safe. My youngest grew up with two parents who fought his entire life. So it's understandable that he doesn't feel that root sense of safety. And living with his dad and seeing how he behaves, and that it, we'll say, quote, works for him, and that it gets him out of feelings, it gets him out of vulnerability and authenticity. It makes sense that my son would adapt to and adopt those behaviors. So now what do I do? How do I make a teenager who's already gone through the critical pieces of his childhood, seemingly never feeling safe? Not physically, there's no physical abuse, but not feeling safe in his own vulnerability, in his own authentic self. So I don't have an answer right now. It's clearly not a switch I can flip. One conversation is not going to suddenly make him feel safe. But I do believe that a door has been opened, and that I'm more aware of pieces of what he's going through on an emotional level, and that will help me going forward to help him. And of course then I start looping back with my other children and different things have gone on with them, and I realized that it's basically just a clusterfuck. So, parenting when you're in a narcissistic relationship, particularly when it gets really bad, and there's neglect of the children. So there was never neglect of, food or shelter. But certainly I can admit that in stepping back, in blocking, and putting up walls around my heart to protect myself from the abuse of my ex, or from my ex, I also put up those walls and didn't see what my children were going through. So it's not enough that I've healed that relationship with my ex-husband. I now have to also help my children heal that relationship with their dad, which is, quite frankly, a more difficult one to do, because it's their dad and they love him and they should love him. Us being divorced has nothing to do with their connection to him, or I don't want there to be. I also can't control it. I know that. I can only control my relationship with them, with my children. And yet, so here's another piece of the puzzle, is that they can all talk to me. I have a different relationship with all of them, but in one way, shape, or form, I can talk to my children about anything, and they can talk to me about, or we can communicate about anything, and we have. They don't have that same thing with their dad. They see how miserable and struggling he is, and they feel bad for him. So when there's an issue or a conflict with them, between them and their dad, they actually don't talk to him about it, because in their words, they can't. So what happens is, then if I come along, they take it out on me. And so that's why I know I'm seeing this stuff manifest through them, quote, at me. I guess because I can take it, great. And yet, that's okay, because while I can't fix the relationship between them and their dad, I can guide them through it, as well as help them heal anything that they're taking on from him and from me. I mean, obviously, but it's a little bit different because I'm very honest and open about things about me, so I'm not perfect at all in any way, shape, or form, and I am very honest about my, I don't want to call them faults, because nothing's ever bad, nothing's ever good. They're just different characteristics, and they know I'm working on it, so they know I'm vulnerable and am willing to admit mistakes. And so I don't even know why I got into that. That's my whole empath and defending myself pattern that I still need to address. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. I just really wanted to jump on because I know that there's a lot of communities that talk about narcissist and empath relationships. And I just wanted to touch on the impact that it has on those around that relationship, particularly when there's children involved. Again, I didn't really come up with any major solutions other than recognizing it and starting the conversations around it. So, hope this resonated with some people, and I appreciate your views. And if you like the content of these videos, which I know are all over the place, but that's who I am. It's the journey I'm on, and I will jump on and talk about what I'm going through and try to give a well-rounded perspective on those things that I'm going through. So, if you like the content, I appreciate a like, comments, and shares. Take care, and sending blessings out. Today's September 10th, so sending blessings out to those around the country of the United States and New York and anybody affected. Well, we all were affected by September 11th, 20 years ago. So just sending blessings and light and love out to everyone. Take care.